Then I was fertilized and became wise. I truly grew and thrived. From a word to a word, I was led to a word. From a deed to a deed, I was led to a deed. The children of Europe, raised in her fire and fury, have a history unequaled. Nowhere has witnessed such depths of tragedy or heights of glory. Mimirs Brunnr is dedicated to celebrating both Europe and her children, to stir the sacred waters that animate, and to bring the ancient ways back to the forefront of the European mind. Through our work, we wish to rekindle those ancient embers of the European fire, and to once again hold our ancestors and their deeds in the reverence they deserve. To know your ancestors is to know yourself. Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for joining me tonight for this impromptu show that I've got going on at the moment. Now, I only decided to do it about 3 hours ago, and I've spent most of that time actually trying to work out my streaming software, as I changed a few settings a while back to do something a little bit different with it. And then I had a few glitches where videos weren't playing, etc. So it took me a little bit of time to get it ready, and I have no notes or no anything going on here. But because of recent events and things that have been going on, I feel it very important that I speak. Now, I was considering doing this show on our other channel, Mimirs Council. For those that don't know, we do have another channel, and it is far more political. I have mentioned it before, so it may not be for everybody. But that's kind of the point of this show. So I didn't really want to do it there when I think what's going on at the moment is some pretty big events and some big things that are going to affect you, even if you don't want to play along. As we know from reading our history and understanding our ancestors here, the world doesn't care if you're ready or not, and the world moves at its own pace, and you keep up or you lose out. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about what I'm going to get into, but you can probably guess from the title what it's going to be roughly based on. And the title, Will We Be the Cowards, is actually a phrase from Consequence of Cowardice that we wrote, one of our biggest videos actually. And it's quite pertinent for this time. Just before I'm going to play Consequence of Cowardice. Now, I know it's a long video, and I did deliberate whether to do it or not, but I believe that for this show, it's important to reiterate what I said in that video and try and tackle it from that perspective, what is going on at the moment. But I'd just like to say hi to everybody that's joined me again, because I'm just looking at the chat now. And I see Spartan Warrior Queen is there, and I haven't seen her or heard from her for a bit, so it's great to see you here. And I'm sorry that you're ill, it seems. There's quite a few people there, and it's good to see you all. Like I say, thank you for joining me, otherwise there's no real point in me doing this. So what I'm going to do is not mess around with this introduction too much longer, and I'm going to play Consequence of Cowardice. Now, I know most of you have probably seen it already, but like I say, it is very important to what I'm going to be discussing tonight, and it really ties us in with our ancestral connections and why I feel I can do this show, which is going to be a little bit more provocative than normal Mimirs Brunnr shows tonight, and why I'm doing it on Mimirs Brunnr and not Mimirs Council. So I will play that video and then make sure, like I say, I know it's a long video, so if you really have watched it a few times and you want to go make a drink, that's fine, obviously. But I would try and encourage you to watch it if you haven't watched it for a while. So now I'm going to have to set this up a little bit different. I'm going to actually play it through our YouTube channel because I've had some problems with the software tonight. So I'm going to hope this works. Otherwise, we're going to have a bit of a problem
But as they pursued those that fled to their camp, they witnessed a most fearful tragedy. The women, standing in black clothes on their wagons, slew all that fled. Some their husbands, some their brethren, others their fathers. Plutarch on the Cimbri. Plutarch's words give us a powerful insight into the minds of our northern ancestors. Of course, this is a Roman writing, and as such it may be a little embellished, but there can be no doubt that our forebears viewed acts of cowardice with the utmost disdain. Tacitus, in his book Germania, on the origin and situation of the Germans, re-emphasizes this harsh perspective. To give ground provided that you return to the attack is considered good tactics rather than cowardice. They bring back the bodies of the fallen, even when a battle hangs in the balance. To throw away one's shield is the supreme disgrace, and the man who has thus dishonored himself is disbarred from attendance at sacrifice or assembly. Many such survivors from the battlefield have ended their shame by hanging themselves. Tacitus. The notion that dropping one's shield was an act of the utmost cowardice is also shared by the great Greek warrior tribe, the Spartans. The phrase, "on your shield or with it," is often said to be the last words a Spartan man would hear from his beloved wife before he set off for battle. The phrase essentially boils down to victory or death, leaving no room for live to fight another day. In these examples, we see the sternness of belief, that there was no greater loss than the loss of one's honor. We also see how important the role of the womenfolk was in maintaining this noble virtue, bravery. The Gaulish peoples would often mock Roman tactics as acts of cowardice. Plutarch gives us a great example of this in his work, Lives of the Noble Greeks and Romans. Upon the meeting of the Roman army and that of the Teutons in the Cimbrian Wars, the Romans, under orders from Gaius Marius, hole up in their encampment, refusing to come out and fight. This cowardly behaviour was met with mocking from the noble Teutons. After several days of pointless pleading and goading to get the cowardly Romans out of their hole, they finally give up. On their way, though, they had a few last slighting remarks for their adversaries. And they marched close to the camp, inquiring whether the Romans had any messages for their wives. "For," they said, "we shall soon be with them." Plutarch on the Teutons. It should also be noted that the Romans lived up to their accusations of cowardice. The Teutons, along with the Ambrones, were eventually defeated by the armies of Gaius Marius after they were attacked in the most cowardly manner. Whilst eating and bathing with their families, the Romans took advantage and launched an ambush. Even when facing the impossible, the Ambrones stood their ground, beating on their shields and chanting their holy name. So proud was their chanting, it can still be heard in noble hearts to this day. This custom of disdain for cowardice was not only present in ancient times. Many of you will already know that under Norse law, to call someone a coward was a serious charge. Many such an accusation would end in a duel, lest the accused wished to live in shame by accepting the title. This was true of Anglo-Saxon culture too. Wulfstan, who wrote the laws for both King Canute and Ethelred, clearly states, "And the man who shall flee from his lord or from his comrade by reason of his cowardice, let him forfeit all that he owns, and his own life." From this it is clear that anyone guilty of cowardice was rendered practically dead to the society, or worse still, relinquished of their life by it. So why was cowardice seen as such a crime? To get insight into this, we must try to understand how our ancestors viewed cowardice. Most of our modern ideas of cowardice are similar to that of Aristotle's, which is that cowardice is driven by excessive fear and that all men are capable of succumbing to it. To be a coward, therefore, is to fear all things. The brave man, on the other hand, is someone who conquers this instinct. Aristotle also mentions another possibility to overcome fear: rashness. which he states is the quality of a madman that does not know fear. It is interesting here that when given an example of this, Aristotle uses the Celts. Of those who go to excess, he who exceeds in fearlessness has no name, but he would be sort of a madman or insensible person if he feared nothing, neither earthquakes nor waves, as they say the Celts do not. Aristotle. This is an intriguing little addition to Aristotle's work and may point to some fundamental clash of philosophical outlooks. When we look back at tribes like the Cimbri and their actions, to our modern mind they can appear rash. They seem to fight with wanton abandonment, almost as if they have no value for their own lives or that of their loved ones. So were they rash, or is it a case of completely different philosophical perspectives? I doubt even the Celts or the Cimbri would deny that fear plays a part in cowardice. But for them there seems to be more at play. Could it be that the uncivilized barbarians, unlike their civilized counterparts, did not see fear as a motivational force? This would render it obsolete as an excuse, and thus anything fear-based would be a choice made, not an instinctual action. If it was viewed as a choice, not an unavoidable consequence, this could explain its harsh treatment. Richard Abel, in his work Cowardice and Duty in Anglo-Saxon England, comes to much the same conclusion. That cowardice was essentially a choice, or at least viewed that way in Anglo-Saxon times. In this modern world, these subtle differences can be hard to see. We live in a culture entrenched in baseline emotions. Fear, lust, and the rest dominate our societies, where everyone has an insincere excuse based on some visceral urge or emotion. It's never anyone's fault. There is always some reason for their lacking. These animalistic forces act as a kind of an emotional currency. Anytime you feel bad, you can exert some primitive feeling as a quick fix. Mimic fear to get sympathy. Indulge in lust to get the amygdala kick. It has become quite popular. The emotional vampires among us sucking on that sympathy like their lives depended on it. Because they do. What if our ancestors had conquered such unevolved urges? That unlike their civilized counterparts, who pondered and excused these instincts, they rose above them. What force, though, has the power to render the primitive obsolete, while still maintaining a devotion to all that is natural? Where fear is a problem in our modern societies, like the military, we use regimental discipline and military drills. This serves the man by replacing emotional responses with habits developed in training. Now, from all the texts I have read on our ancient forebears, military discipline was not one of their qualities. They, as Aristotle suggested, often appear rash, almost overly emotional. They did not keep fear at bay by remembering drills. Something else drove them. Some higher arc or higher principle. There is only one force I know of that can reduce fear to a choice and still hold nature in reverence, and that is love. To my mind, our ancestors, far from being uncivilized, were in fact truly enlightened. To give in to fear was to forsake your love for your family and folk. It was to hold a primitive urge above all you hold dear. It was to reduce life itself to a desperate struggle of the primitive mind, instead of lifting it up to the most sacred of all the gifts of the gods and goddesses. Their rash appearance was not due to madness, but an expression of their reverence for life. The Cimbri may have died on that battlefield many years ago, but in that moment they truly lived. A modern man could live 100 lifetimes and never know such freedom. Never knowing the true value of the breeze upon his face or the precious smile of a loved one. The civilized mind, the slave mind, recoils in fear at such a sight. Unable to process it, it declares it madness, because he who has never lived can never know life's meaning. They spend all their time avoiding it and reasoning their way out of it. These societies produce thinkers. They forever talk about life without ever living it. Our barbarian ancestors did not talk it, they walked it. It embodied every action they made. They left us no books, only their deeds from which we must learn. Love does conquer all, but not in a pitiful manner. Love sets about routing from the battlefield of life all illusions or fears. A man who can wield the power of love in all areas of his life is the unbeatable, the immovable object. Fear is an illusion. It seeks to trick you, make you believe that existence, no matter how pitiful, is more important than living. It plots to turn slavery into an option and blame the righteous for the ills of the world. It is important to remember when I speak of love, I do not mean some pitiful modern expression of it. Love only has value if it is discriminatory. The idea that anyone can love all things equally is a lie told by cowards to convince themselves their cowardice is enlightenment. Friedrich Nietzsche expressed it best when he said, "I have often laughed at the weaklings who thought themselves good because they had no claws." Slavery was seen as a fate worse than death, as it strips the man of his manhood and reduces his children to the property of another. This is the true goal of compassion, to refuse suffering at any cost. It is only in the Germanic and Celtic languages that the word freedom originates in the word for love. Only in the ancient North does love set you free. Only in the ancient North is freedom seen as the ultimate expression of love. Thus, a man who claims to love his folk and family could never see slavery as an option. As much as the images conjured by his words disturb me, to emphasize this point, I will add the second part of the Plutarch quote I mentioned at the beginning of this piece. The women standing in black clothes on their wagons slew all that fled. Some their husbands, some their brethren, others their fathers, and, strangling their little children with their own hands, threw them under the wheels and the feet of the cattle, and then killed themselves. They tell of one who hung herself from the end of the pole of a wagon, with her children tied dangling at her heels. They may have appeared rash to the civilized, but they knew the true beauty of life, to love without excuses. Through their enlightened minds, they pinned all their hopes and dreams to love's banner, refusing to accept anything that would debase them, anything that would reduce their value. This is why they never succumb to the temptation of ignoble tactics or alien notions of civilization. If they were to live, it must be a life that is theirs, not the life of a sniveling coward who reveres existence above living. They instead revered the true nature of life. They revered their ability to dance their dance, to sew upon its tapestry their innermost beauty. They were the true artists, the truly noble of men. These men saw the fate of Rome long before its citizens suffered it. They knew that if they were to succumb to the unevolved principles of Rome, they would become chained like slaves to it. They knew the only chains worthy to bind them were that of duty, duty to kith and kin. In this way, they alone knew equality. They alone knew love. They lived as one, sharing bread and memories, greatness or shame. The fate of one was the fate of all, with no exception. In this environment, cowardice becomes impossible, for they knew the fate of a cowardly people. They knew the horrors which their blood would have to endure if they fell victim to its primitive whispering. Can you imagine a world full of cowards? A world full of bitter, jealous and twisted cowards, without any shred of honor? Knowing no low, stooping to all manner of treachery and deceit to seize power for their warped desires? With only subservient cowards about them, Who could resist their will? The meek could only protest injustice and beg for mercy, but with no just men to hear their calls, their fate would be sealed. A world full of ruthless and pitiful cowards would become hell on earth. No man nor beast would be outside of its grip. All things would fall into decay and disgrace. In a world such as this, there would be no comfort, no escape. Only hellish screams in the pitch of night. Terror would grip all. Existence would become a hopeless plight. For all its reasoning, it would become a world of torture and suffering with no end in sight. This is why our ancestors abhorred cowardice. This is why they refused to take up tactics and laws unfitting of their noble nature. This is why the Cimbri chose noble death. This is why Boudica screamed no more. Now take a look around you and tell me that they were rash, that they were naive, and that they did not know the true value of life. I wonder, is their dream of love dead? The time our ancestors feared most for their children is upon us. A world full of torture and suffering, compounded by cowardice, a world full of slaves. Their names in ruin and their beloved children at the mercy of the sick and twisted. All they endured to avoid this, yet it is so. I often wonder if sacred thunderstorms embody their sorrow. Heavens open and their tears flood. Lightning cracks as a sign of their fury. How long will we suffer this? How long will we reduce our love to excuses for our cowardice? The question is, are we worthy of our ancestors' names? Are we able to pick up their ancient shields and beat them in rhythm once again? Can we muster the courage to lift our voices and make the earth tremble to the chorus of our ancient names? Do we have the courage of heart to put an end to this suffering one way or another? Or have we forgotten how to live and love in a manner befitting of our noble blood? Will we be the cowards that choose to value our fears more than all that we love and consign our descendants to a world without hope? The choice is yours.
Welcome back, folks, and I do again apologise for it being such a long video, especially at the very start of the stream. But like I say, I thought it was very important to what I want to talk about. And like I say, this is, as I've been looking at some of the chat there, a lot of people are getting frustrated, and this is why I wanted to do this stream, because the time we live in at the moment is heating up, quite literally. In many cases here, especially, you might see a bit of sweat. It's red hot here. But what we're going through in this year, in 2020, is quite phenomenal. Now, I've been around for a very long time, looking in our circles, probably nearly over 15 years, where I've been putting serious thought and effort into what's going on in the world and our place in it. And I've never known so much craziness happening in such a short period of time. We're only just over halfway through this year at the moment, and it's showing no signs of halting in the pace and speed that's going on. Now, the reason I wanted to do this video, or what initially triggered, well, I've been triggered a lot, let's put it that way, by a lot of things that have been going on, and that's one of the reasons for the lack of content, by the way, at the moment. It's just so much happening, it's hard to know how to address it. Although we have been putting out some videos on our secondary channel, Mimirs Council, about some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight. So what I'll do is, some of the things I'm going to talk about, I won't go into too much detail, especially if we've done some big projects over at Mimirs Council. What I'll do is put some links in this description at the end when I know what I mention, because like I say, I haven't planned this show, and you can watch those at your own pleasure. Yeah. But what initially well, what the final straw was an article I read, and we're going to go through that article. And I only had a brief look at it earlier. I haven't even read it all properly. I had to walk away from it. And some other things, I was just looking through Twitter and things like that just before I came on, and I wanted to look at a few things there, just see what was going on. And again, there was more and more. This attack upon us, our freedoms, and us as ethnic Europeans is at fever pitch now. And like I say, I'm going to go through everything in a bit of detail, but what I want to state here, it's not a time anymore to go along to get along. It's not a time anymore to go, I don't see it and I don't believe it, because, as I said before, it doesn't matter, right? The world is what it is. And it doesn't matter if it's planned or if it's pushed or what's going on. People go, oh, no, it's just they're trying to foment a race war and things like this. Well, it doesn't matter. If somebody throws a viper in your face, you got to deal with the viper. There's no point saying, well, he threw it, it's not the viper's fault, right? It's going to get you, yeah? So that's why I wanted to make this. And when I go through the article and that, I might get a bit heated here. But let's start with what's happened this year and just try and break it down a little bit about what's going on. Because I think it's really important. I think there's a lot of information out there. We're getting into a position where we're getting in information overload to a point, and it's confusing people. It's getting people fighting and divided along lines they didn't even know that existed. Right? They've got like a cake and they're dropping the knife on it, dividing us and dividing us and dividing us. Some of those divisions are natural, and that's why they're there. Racial and ethnic divisions will always exist. There's been no empire on the planet that has managed to forge a nation, an empire out of different national groups. Rome, that is mentioned in Consequence of Cowardice there, was pretty good at it. For a few hundred years, probably 400 or more years, it had pretty much a multi-ethnic, but they were all European, but it was still a multi-ethnic empire. And that failed. And it failed because it undermined itself. You know, Rome ended up with, Philip the Arab as one of their emperors. When you hear people talking about Deuce Volt and, not Deuce Volt, sorry, but when you hear people talking about the greatness of Rome, they try to, and I agree, Rome was a very powerful and a great empire, but it fell to pieces because it tried to incorporate everybody. So those are the natural divisions that we're seeing get easily opened up, and one of the reasons that we've had mass immigration into our countries. Divide and conquer. Well, if you can't divide the people, bring in new people, and then the divide will be there already. But there are other divisions we've seen with let's go to the start with COVID-19 or coronavirus, the crowned virus, right? And just as a little note there, it's no. I don't believe it's any accident, knowing the occult nature of some of the people that are in charge of this world, that we had a crown, and then we had people kneel before it. But let's start with coronavirus. Now, this is one of the subjects that we've covered very heavily on Mimirs Council. We've done a couple of small documentaries on it, actually. And it really doesn't matter if you believe it's real or not. Its implications are pretty minor, as the virus goes. Just as an instance here, in 1990, had about the same deaths from a flu. Nobody mentions it. Nobody remembers it. Similar in 2020, we had a flu that killed about as many as COVID is meant to have killed. Now, the statistics of COVID, I'm not going to go into details, say, because we've done a video on it. And I've done a video where I really break down the statistics, using their statistics, showing that we don't really know how many have died from it. Probably a hell of a lot less than they're saying. But what I'm saying is, in this 1990 and the year 2000, nobody remembers those flus, even though they killed us about the same amount. And maybe even more, considering we don't know the things. So, but what is important about, and like I say, I'm just not going to get into it because it's not that important for what I want to speak about, because it's what's happening now. And we had lockdown. We were locked in our houses. And even though we've had these riots, which I am going to get to, now they're turning the heat back up on us. right? Now we got to lock down again. All of a sudden they forgot about it for a while, why Black Lives Matter and Antifa ran riot across the streets. But now we got to remember it again. And in Holland recently, they had a protest in The Hague. A few weeks before, the police were kneeling before Black Lives Matter protests. But because these people were generally native Dutch, and they were protesting being locked in their houses and the stupid restrictions of making people wear masks everywhere they go, they got water hosed, they got beaten and attacked because they were disobeying the COVID-19 restrictions. Now, this goes much further than just things like that. In this country now, we're seeing things such as governments are going to track, restaurants will track everybody, keep all the details of everybody that goes there so they can keep track of you for the spread of COVID-19. Now, this is something that when I first heard about the COVID-19 outbreak and I started to look into it for the documentaries that we did over at Mimirs Council, it was something that was easily predictable. I mean, we were going to go into that in one of the documentaries. It was just too much to do in a short period of time to keep up with the current affairs. But now we're getting tracking apps, and I can't get on a train here in the UK without wearing a mask, without downloading their app. So I'm not getting on a train. I'm not doing anything that I don't want to do anymore. And I'm not having it. I'm not going to be lied to and coerced whilst they let others run free. And even if they didn't let the others run free to cause riot and mayhem, I wouldn't be doing it anyway. And this is the point of the Consequence of Cowardice video. This is the point where we have to say enough is enough. And obviously, COVID-19 is only a small aspect, but it is going to play into the bigger picture, similar as climate change. It's all directed where? They tell me that BAME, and that's a term they use in the UK for black, Asian, minority, and other. I'm not even sure exactly what it means, but it means what we call the minority or the privileged class. That's what I'm going to call them. Yeah, because they are special citizens that get special rights that I don't get. Yeah, we've seen in the media they say that they're the worst affected. Well, they're not. Look at the world. Look at the maps of COVID outbreaks. Well, if it was real, if it is killing people, it's only killing people in the West. It's not killing anyone in Africa. Not killing anyone in India. A population of 1 billion that live literally. I mean, let's pull no punches here. My brother visited India. He told me that they shit in the fountains that were built in the Victorian age were built by the British when they were there. They shit in the streets. Yet they didn't get a massive outbreak, and we've got to wash our hands and sing a little song while we do. We've got to clap enthusiastically every Thursday night for the NHS staff. Only before we were also clapping for the police. Then a few weeks later, after Black Lives Matter protests, suddenly the police were the biggest enemy on the planet. And you know what? The biggest thing about this, and one thing that I want to talk about on this, is that the very same people that were calling me a COVID-idiot for telling them that I don't care about their stupid virus were the very same people defending the Black Lives Matter protests, and the very same people that have now come out calling everybody a COVID-idiot for not going along with their stupid propaganda. It's the very same people. And the targets, whether it be COVID-19, in this my country, England, all we had on the news, how it was affecting all the minorities, how they were worse affected, how they were helping us in the NHS, how they were doing this, how they were doing that. Right? It was never about us. It's part of an anarcho-tyranny. For people that are not aware of that term, it means where you overly punish things like saying a tweet that somebody offended somebody, you get sent to jail. But rapists get away with pretty much nothing. And I don't think anybody looking at the world at the moment would disagree that we're living in an anarcho-tyranny. Yet there is a difference to just a standard anarcho-tyranny here. It also seems to be divided along racial or ethnic lines. Where white people that make a tweet, and I'm going to get to a tweet because I noticed it earlier and I do want to talk about a tweet. But people that make tweets where they go to 2 years. They're the white people doing that. When a so-called minority says kill all white men, she didn't lose her job at a prestigious university here in the UK. When a white man who, after a terrorist attack and after giving his prayers for the victims, said something about killing Muslims, or I forget exactly what he said, then removed the tweet and apologized for the tweet, he got 2 years in jail. She kept her job and was defended. And this, I'm going back a few years now. It's getting worse now. Yeah. So when we think of this anarcho-tyranny, it is not actually just the punishing minor crimes and not punishing heavier crimes. It is divided along racial lines. And this is why I'm calling minorities now the privileged class. They're a special category. And they are. In the UK, they have special rules. They're a protected class under UK rules, under UK law. Okay? But this is not what you'd see, because no longer we couldn't breathe because we were wearing masks. Suddenly a black criminal got killed. Now, I'm not saying whether I'm no fan of the police, let's put it that way. The police do what they're told. And I'm not saying he deserved to die. Yes? What I'm saying is, because of his death, then suddenly we have a worldwide revolt. Yeah, in the middle of apparently a pandemic, suddenly everybody's on the streets protesting the death of one man, which has been an ongoing thing that we've seen happening time and time again. I Can't Breathe was not the first time. Eric Garner, and I believe there was even another one that said it. The irony of people having I Can't Breathe written on their masks is quite something if you look into the health implications of wearing a mask, that is. Now, I'm not here either to talk about that, like I said with the COVID, fake or not fake. It doesn't matter, because the reality is when the viper's in your face, the viper's in your face. Yeah? We have to deal with what's coming after all these events. And what came after that event with George Floyd was a worldwide backlash against whites. They say it was against police brutality, but anybody that saw the videos of coming out there, they were attacking random white people, which never got any news coverage, of course. They were... white privilege starts coming up again, and I have done a show about white privilege. I'll put that in a link as well from before, where I do talk more ancestrally. And this is why I didn't know whether to put this show on here, because it's very much current affairs, but I will try and tie it up with our ancestors as we go along. And we're seeing it continue. Here in the UK, we had a apparent terrorist attack or a non-terrorist attack, because the guy, although he targeted whites and was a Muslim, from an Arab, I believe he was from Libya, a country that we bombed to shit and went into and then got took over completely by crazy Islamic groups. He came over here, he's apparently mentally ill, and he's not a terrorist, but he targeted white people in a park. Well, before that even made much news, we had a bigger story that came along. Some guy rented out a plane and just put a banner on it saying White Lives Matter. But that became a bigger story than the previous one. And everybody forgot instantly that 3 white people had just been murdered in a park whilst trying to enjoy the sunshine and get a bit of freedom after being locked up for most of the year because of COVID-19. That was instantly forgotten, and everybody came out to condemn it. And his response was not just about the things that had happened with the terrorist attack. If people in America might not know, but our football season, which is what you guys call soccer, stopped because of COVID-19, and it has recently started back up with some restrictions. Well, every single one of our footballers in every single division has got on his knees before the game in support of Black Lives Matter. And not only that every one of their names has been removed from the back of their shirt to be replaced with what? Black Lives Matter. And anybody that nobody has dared yet stand up and saying, I'm not getting on my knees. And I'm not wearing this shirt because they're going along to get along. But what I really want to address tonight is what going along to get along will lead to. Because we're getting hints. It's okay saying all lives matter, that won't work. That won't even satisfy them. Right? All lives matter, you just don't understand the problem. When I was growing up for years, we were taught to be colorblind as a child. That's what I was taught. Well, now you're the problem. If you're colorblind, you're the problem because you don't see it. So you don't see race. And if you see race and you actually like your race, as I do, I love my ancestry and I love my people. I think we're the most beautiful people on the planet. And any other person that thought that their people weren't the most beautiful people on the planet, well, then they are mentally ill. Not me. Yeah? But what was... Now, I forgot my point there a little bit. Sorry, like I say, it's a bit of impromptu and I have no notes to go back on. So, but the point is, I believe that we're beautiful. I know that we are. And I expect an African to feel the same about his people. I've got no problem with that. But when people that come to my country, a country that was built by my forebears, with my blood, we didn't have African slaves in the UK, just so people know this. We didn't have African slaves in the UK. The big migration into the UK came after World War II with the Windrush generation. They were Caribbean people that moved to the UK for work because we'd lost so many in a war that needn't be fought. The one man did protest for peace, but he was locked up at the address of war. We won't go into that too much. So they came here for work. We allowed them in. And every single one of the immigrants after they came here either to seek asylum. They came here to get work and raise the standard of their living. And what are they doing now? They're marching in the streets and throwing shit in my face. And telling me that I, who has never owned a slave and has never done them any harm personally, that has been part of a generation that was taught to accept them, there's part of a generation that was allowed them in. Now I'm the problem. Whiteness is the problem. Well, no, I'm not having it. And I don't care what people think of that. They can call me racist, they can call me a supremacist, but just for one instant, right? A supremacist is somebody that wants to rule over somebody else. You know, that's what it means. Well, I don't want to rule over anyone. Except I want my people, and I want every people to rule over themselves. So if they take their bags, they can go back to their country, and they can be out of the country that is supremacist. But we all know this, and we all know that these answers are obvious. They're as obvious as the day is long to people like me and you, to you guys listening and me. We can see that there's an easy solution. If you come to my country and you don't like it, go home. I've got no problem. But that's not what this is about. They're being riled by media. Black Lives Matter must be the only revolution in history that is supported by every single aspect of the status quo. Every company has made statements. I had links up the other day because I was writing a video for Mimirs Council. And I had links up. You would not believe it's every company, celebrities, every media outlet is in support of them. Every politician is pandering to them. Yet they're a revolutionary movement? I don't think so. That's not a revolutionary movement. This is orchestrated by those in charge to, I can only assume, right? People want to tell me that white replacement is wrong. I can only assume it is to destroy me because every single one of these people that are supporting Black Lives Matter are supporting comments like I'm going to go through here. I'll go through this first, actually. Now, I'm going to go off the camera to go through this because I haven't read it all yet. But I actually wanted to I'm just going to go live with looking at this thread. Now let me just make sure I can switch this over properly. If I can work out where I am. Okay, 1 second. We're going to... Yep, I think if I do it, it should work. Okay, here it is there, right? Now I'm just going to switch over and get the chat back up. But here we have a little thread by a guy called Nicholas Goyat. Now I'm not sure where he's from, but he's protecting a lady that works at the same college as him, which is, I believe it's Cambridge. Let me just check, because I do have a little bit of a background here on Priyamvada Gopal. Yep, she works at Cambridge University. Now we're just going to go through this thread a little bit. So I haven't been through it myself, but this guy's going to defend her because, as you can see there, he puts the tweet for us to see. I'll say it again. White lives don't matter as white lives. Now, what that means at the end, I have no understanding of, but let's listen to Nicholas Goyet's context, shall we? Now, the first thing he mentions here is what I've already mentioned. Burnley are ashamed and embarrassed. Yes, the club this man supports, and he flew this plane over, were embarrassed and ashamed that somebody would fly a banner saying white lives matter. We're going to flick through it a bit because I had a bit of a flick through of it. There's a nice little picture of the sign there you can see in all of its glory. But as Nicholas says, this was widely condemned by footballers themselves, which in turn seemed to have triggered those who thought it was a good idea in the first place to hijack a Black Lives Matter tribute by demanding respect for white lives. Just to qualify here what I already said, this came only a few days after 3 white people had been murdered by a non-white in a park in Reading, just outside London. Okay? So we're hijacking a movement because nobody's paying respect to white lives. And he goes on here to say, here in Britain, we've been dealing with the aftershocks of this all week. They've been dealing with the aftershocks, just to clarify this again. They've been dealing with the aftershocks of somebody flying a freaking banner, not the aftershocks of 3 people being murdered in a park. That's what Nicholas is dealing with. They're the aftershocks that he feels. Yeah. The guy who paid for the banner has been fired, which he has, because his employer concluded that it didn't want to employ someone who'd pull a stunt like this. Now, here's a very funny quote here. Our right-wing newspapers have been unusually hesitant about defending the banner, but right-wingers on social media have been circulating videos and posts in support of White Lives Matter all week. Is that... Now, this isn't the worst I'm going to cover tonight, because I haven't read this, so I'm just going to go through it with you guys. But this is what is angering me, right? Somehow being in support of White Lives Matter. Now, but it gets worse here, I can see now, just flicking through it. The backdrop to this is that here in the UK, as in the US, we have very little education on even the basics of race. Well, let's just clarify again here. That's because people in your institution deny race exists, which causes a problem in discussion. And this is, I'm going to go on a tangent here. So I'll flick back for a second, because I want to go on this tangent. It's been something that I want to talk about here. Why can we not have a discussion about race or racism? Because nobody knows what the hell it means, because there's so much confusion. And this is one of the tricks of what's going on, right? We deny race exists, but you're racist. And your race exists and whiteness exists. Yeah, and we get this confusion. What is racism? Well, racism can only be perpetrated against black people because racism is, what is it? They say power plus privilege. I don't know what the hell they're on about, but they make up this nonsense in these, social studies. But anyway, right? So they say that, but the law says that you can be prosecuted for a racial crime against a white person if you're non-white. In fact, Scotland has one of the highest cases of prosecuting actually Pakistani men for anti-white violence and racial hate. So it exists, but it doesn't exist, and you can be racist, but you can't be racist. And there's this complete confusion. Well, in the ancient times, one thing that was absolutely essential for a debate, especially in the ancient Greek times. Yes, and prejudice plus power. Thank you, chronologer. Well, one thing that was essential for discussion, before you will never get to a conclusion unless you agree upon the terms you're using. Right? So when they confuse a term like racist, so nobody knows what it means. Literally. No, everybody's got a different opinion. You go down the street, you ask your friends what racism is. They don't know. You'll get different answers. Well, when you have a situation where nobody, it's essentially like the Tower of Babel in the biblical story. They can't you can't communicate. Well, when you can't communicate, that just intensifies. Yeah, intensifies the disenfranchisement. I feel as a white person, and this I feel as an ethnic European in my own country, an Englishman. I feel under threat. Well, the black people are being told by the media that they're under threat. And we can't communicate because they've broken the language. They've essentially created the Tower of Babel. We can't speak to each other because when I say racist, I mean something completely different to when they say racist. And when they say this, and this is part of the social sciences, where they've changed the language. So when they say white lives don't matter, they don't mean white lives don't matter. Or when they say whiteness must end, which he goes on to say, and we'll get to it in a minute, whiteness must end. They don't mean that to kill white people, but that's what it sounds like to me, but there's a communication, right? That's what they say. But they do because the fruits of it will be what it will show. And the fruits of what is going on here right now, with statements like what we're seeing there, the fruits of that will be a world in which so-called minorities, they are not minorities. Indians in this country are called minorities. There are over a billion Indians in India. India is still largely Indian. Yeah? Africa is still largely African. The Middle East is still mostly Arab. Yeah? Europe is fast becoming less European, to the point where we have sell-by dates or use-by dates. I think 2060, 2040, 2050, you name it. Every country's got a date when they're going to be minority native. India doesn't have a date. No country in the continent Africa has a date. No Arab country has a date. We have a date when we will be a minority in our own country. And that's when the fruits of what is happening now will really come to bear. That's when the fruits of these trees that are being planted. Now, we'll just quickly go through this a little bit more here over on the browser because he does mention some of this. Whiteness is normalized. White people have the privilege of never being defined by their race. He just did. Okay? Let's just point out that he just did. This is the point. His whole statement is a contradiction. Yeah? He just defined me by my race and then said I'm not defined by my race. He just said that white lives matter is a negative, is bad because it's all about black lives. He defined by race. He's the one defining by race. Yes? But we don't, because this is their language. This is the bullshit they speak to us. Whiteness in the UK and the US is not and never has been a category of disadvantage. Well, it is now because I can't fly a freaking banner Because if I fly a banner, I'm not respecting Black Lives Matter. In I don't know who the hell that is. Phrase, racial privilege is a bloody heirloom which white people silently inherit. So we inherit it, right? So this is another thing I want to bring up, right? You can never appease this. Yeah. You say you don't see race, then you're more of a racist than the racist. Well, what they call the racist. You say, we're different, but, we're all just equal. Well, then you're a racist because you're not acknowledging your privilege, and they're not equal because they need help. They need help because of your bloody heirloom that you've inherited. You cannot appease them, and this is going to be a reoccurring theme in this stream. You cannot appease them. All you do, and this is an important point as well, when you try to appease them, you show yourself as backing down. You show a weakness. And I'll tell you a little lesson about nature here. When you run, when the prey runs, the hunter chases. That's what happens. My brother actually travelled around the world quite a bit, and he looked after some big cats. You couldn't turn your back on a cat, because as soon as you turned your back on a big cat, they can't help but attack. As soon as you show weakness, they will attack. You've got to be unapologetic. You've got to say, yes, I am here, and yes, I am proud of who I am, and fuck you. I don't care. And sorry for the language there. I don't normally swear on Mimirs Brunnr, but it's going to get more heated as we go on. Anyway, we've inherited this bloody heirloom that we can't get rid of. Yeah, most mainstream commenters trying to explain why the White Lives Matter banner was a bad idea have suggested that, of course, White Lives Matter in the context that explains why the banner was offensive. I don't know what he's on about there, to be fair. Here's Sky Sports. I was going to watch this video. I didn't. I'm not going to play it because I just really don't care to listen to this black guy tell me why I'm offensive. The line that, of course, White Lives Matter is intended to reassure white people who have been unnerved by the focus of black lives and who feel that the toppling of statues or protests against the police are somehow a criticism of them. He's literally just said we've inherited a bloody heirloom, so it is a criticism of us, but maybe he denied, I don't know. But it also perhaps inadvertently has the effect of reassuring white people that whiteness isn't anyway a problem. So, I mean, these guys are insane. These guys are insane. We white people shouldn't be just creating more space for black people. We should be interrogating the entire system of race that they deny, which has done horrific damage across the centuries. That means admitting that whiteness is a problem. Well, no, fuck you, Nicholas. I'm not going to admit that whiteness is a problem. I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is foreign people to my nation, coming to my nation, demanding equal rights and privilege rights after coming here begging to live in our society. I mean, what the hell? They come here as immigrants, financial or asylum seekers, and then demand that I bend my entire society to them after they are the most privileged of their people for being here. They walk around with their iPhones and their new sneaker, and they're living off government benefits, many of them. They've left the war zones that they supposedly come from, normally young men. They've abandoned their race. They've abandoned their country. They've showed that they're spineless cowards. And they turn up at my door. We let them in, and then they attack me for not giving them something more. Bollocks. Priya's tweet is provocative, but it clearly says that white lives don't matter as white lives. That qualification. What the hell is that qualification? I hope he explains this to me. That qualification is everything. She's not saying that white people don't matter, just that whiteness shouldn't be the grounds on which we defend our worth. But blackness should be the grounds on which we defend our worth. So why? Maybe he's going to explain it to me. So why do black lives matter? Because black people come into this struggle from a totally different place. They are perpetually racialized. discriminated against, defined by the colour of their skin. They never had the privilege of being able to forget or normalise race. Yeah, because they moved to a country. If I moved to Nigeria, I'm pretty certain that I would always be seen as a white guy. My children will always be seen as white children. They will always be seen as white people. They will always be seen as European, and they would never be accepted as a Nigerian. But in my country, they bend over backwards, most people do, to consider these people that come over, even first generation, as English or British. And I don't even want them to have the term British. The British are historic people. It's not so they claim to be British. Anyway, I think we've probably done enough with this guy. I mean, he's going to keep going on and going on and going on, I'm pretty sure. What I'm going to do now, though, folks, is I'm going to get a drink because I'm a bit hot here. It's absolutely melting here. I don't know if that set me off as well, the heat. But I'm going to get a drink and I'm going to play a video, the Galgacus speech. And when we get back, we'll look at this article that was the final straw, because this makes me sad. This article that I'm going to bring up makes me sad and angry, because this isn't people like me suffering. This is our children, right? So we're going to get to that after this short break. But I'm going to play the Galgacus speech because we kind of need some of that fire that Galgacus had. So maybe that will help remind us. Okay, so I'm going to get to that now, and I'll catch you in a minute.
Whenever I consider the origin of this war and the necessity of our position, I have firm belief that this union of ours will be the birth of freedom to the whole of Britain. To us, slavery is a thing unknown. There is nothing beyond us but sea, and even that is not safe, tormented as we are by the Roman fleet. And thus in war and battle, where the brave find glory, even the coward will find safety. Former battles where the Romans were resisted still left in us a last hope of salvation. Being as we are the most renowned nation of Britain, dwelling in the very heart of the island and out of sight of the shores of the conquered, even our eyes were unpolluted by the contagion of slavery. To us who dwell at the very edge of the earth and of freedom, this remote sanctuary to Britain's glory has up to now been our defence. Now, however, the furthest limits of Britain are thrown open, and as with all things, the unknown always inspires intrigue. But there are no tribes beyond us, nothing indeed but waves and rocks, and yet more terrible Romans, from whose oppression escape is vainly sought through obedience and submission. Robbers of the world, who by their universal plunder have exhausted the land and rifled the deep. If the enemy be rich, they are voracious. If he be poor, they lust for dominion. Neither the east nor the west has been able to satisfy them. Alone among men, they covet with equal eagerness both poverty and riches. To robbery, slaughter, and plunder, they give the lying name of empire. They create a desert and then call it a peace. Nature has ordained that every man's children and kin are his dearest objects. Yet these are torn from us by conscriptions, so they may be slaves elsewhere. Our wives and our sisters, even if they escape violation from the enemy, are dishonored in the name of friendship and hospitality. Our goods and riches they demand as their tribute, and our harvests to fill their granaries. Under the whip, and with only insults to encourage us, our hands and bodies are forced to clear forests and marshes. Creatures born to slavery are sold once for all, and are fed by their masters. But Britain is daily purchasing, daily feeding her own enslaved people. And as in a household, the last comer among the slaves is always the lowest among his companions, so we in a world long used to slavery, as the newest and the most contemptible, are marked out for destruction. We have neither fruitful plains, nor mines, nor harbours to work, so that we may be spared. Our valour too, and strong spirit, are offensive to rulers. Besides our remoteness and seclusion, while they give protection, provoke suspicion. Since then you cannot hope for mercy, take courage, I implore you, whether it be safety or renown that you hold most dear. Under leadership of a queen, the Brigantes were able to burn a colony, storm a camp, and had they not fallen short at the final asking, would have thrown off their yoke. Let us then, as fresh and unconquered people, who are never likely to abuse our freedoms, show at the first asking what heroes Caledonia is made of. Do you believe the Romans will be as brave in war as they are decadent in peace? To our misfortune and discord they owe their fame. They turn the errors of an enemy into the renown of their own army. An army which, composed of every variety of nations, is held together by success. Thus it will be broken by defeat. These Gauls and Germans, and it shames me to say fellow Britons, who though now they give their lives to support a stranger's rule, have been its enemies for longer than its subjects, thus are not bound by either loyalty or affection. Fear and terror alone are weak bonds of attachment. Remove them, and those who have ceased to fear will begin to hate. All the incentives to victory are on our side. The Romans have no wives to kindle their courage, no parents to taunt them if they flee. Many have either no country or one far away. They are few in number, dismayed by their ignorance. They look upon a sky, a sea and forests, all unfamiliar to them. Encircled and ensnared as they are by the unknown, the gods have delivered them into our hands. Do not fear their idle display of gold and silver, as neither has the ability to protect or wound. Within the very ranks of the enemy, we will find our own forces. Britons will acknowledge their own cause. Gauls will remember past freedoms. The Germans will abandon them, as did the Ushipi. Behind them, there is nothing to fear. Their forts are ungarrisoned, their colonies in the hands of old men, and what with only disloyal subjects and oppressive rulers, the towns are uninterested and full of discord. On the one side, you have a general and an army. On the other, forced tribute, hard labor, and all the hardships of the enslaved. Whether you endure this indignity forever or instantly avenge its threat, on this field you decide. Think therefore as you advance to battle of your ancestors and your posterity.
Welcome back, folks, and thanks for staying with me. And I know I've been a bit ranty, like I say. I have not got any notes for this. It just, I just wanted to speak on some of the things that were happening and just give a bit of more of a raw approach to it, rather than overthinking it. Because, as I say, there's information overload going on at the moment. Absolute madness everywhere, and it's hard to pull your thoughts together concisely, and sometimes a good rant can help anyway. At least get some things off your chest. Now, I just want to, before we move on, that Mrs. Gopal, who said that white lives don't matter, not only works at Cambridge University, but she is an immigrant herself, just so you know. She wasn't even born in the UK. She came here from, well, she was actually a very privileged Indian. Her father was a diplomat. So she's lived a very privileged life and has come here and decided to. She's I'll read her wiki a little bit here. She's most famous for her post-colonial literature and theory on gender, feminism, and Marxism. Yeah. So make no mistake, these people that are promoting this are Marxists, and if you go along at any point, you're going along with them, and they do not want equality. They want domination. Yeah. The minorities in our countries do not want to be equal. Then they're already better than equal. They're already more equal than others, right? But anyway, we'll try and move on a little bit because there's a few things I want to do, and it's getting pretty late here, and I want to cover a few more things. What we're going to do now is look at an article that just said that made me think, screw it, I'm going live tonight because I just want to get these things off my chest. Now, I haven't read the whole article. I only got a chance to skim through it, and I couldn't read it all because I was busy putting my little ones to bed when somebody shared it with me. But I'm going to read it through now whilst I'm with you live, and we're going to try and address some of it. And I know I've done a bit of this tonight, but it's just something that I think is necessary, especially with this. And I'm going to apologise in a hand that I don't pay for subscriptions of newspapers, so there are adverts everywhere, all over this page, so it might be a little bit hard to read. But we're gonna have a look at it anyway. I'm just gonna move the screen over so I can see. It's gonna make me a little bit whiter. But that's not a bad thing, right? Because when I switch over, I've got in the main screen here. So I'm just gonna switch to the browser again. That should work. And I don't know why the advertisers think I want number 7 new advanced retinol 1.5% complex night. I don't even know what that does, but anyway. It's in the mail, this story. It's about I should have played the video first. I tell you what, I'm going to switch back and play the video first. Sorry about that, guys, but there is a video that goes along with this. It's about it. It's a program that's going to come on the TV tomorrow.
If you're white, you're going to come with me. People who associate themselves as black, you're going to remain in this room.
What happens when a class of ordinary school children...
Have you ever thought what it means to be white?
God, that's nerve-wracking.
...are divided to confront their own race?
Doesn't really mean anything to be white.
I love being described as black.
The contrast between the two rooms is phenomenal.
Can admitting our differences...
We just talked and we understood each other.
...help bring us together?
There's not much about black history. It's literally just white.
That was outrageous.
It's been the most emotionally challenging thing I've ever done.
The school that tried to end racism starts Thursday at 9.
Okay, we'll come back to this screen for a little minute here. That is the little trailer for this, but the article's worse because in that trailer you heard it says the contrast between the rooms is phenomenal. I forget exactly what she says, but I'm going to tell you the full quote. With that smile and gleam on her face, she's talking about the contrast between the black room or the minorities that have been pushed together and the white room. They split them, but we're going to read the article and say what she actually says. The contrast is phenomenal. One is like a carnival and the other is like a funeral. Guess which is which? And guess what they're trying to tell us with that? But we're going to go through that. And there was a little girl there that says that being white doesn't mean anything. This is what they're teaching our children, and this is why I put it on Mimirs Brunnr. Because Mimirs Brunnr is about honouring our ancestors and our ancestral faith. And when I see children tell me that white meat doesn't mean anything to them, whilst black people love themselves and are dancing, and they're telling me that the racism that is going on at the moment is whites against blacks, that the whites are oppressed when they're ruining and destroying the culture of our children, making them believe that they are nothing. And it gets worse. We're going to go through the article now because it does get much worse. When this actually comes on, it's going to be quite something. But here's the article, right? And I'll just get the chat back up so I can read what you guys are saying. The London school that tried to end racism. It tried to end racism. That's what it's... that was the premise of the experiment. Yeah? 7 pupils are divided into mixed race affinity groups. They're not mixed race, but we'll get to that. It's whites versus everybody else. But for a TV experiment, but white... God's sake, these things are here. But white pupils are terrified they could ruin their lives by saying the wrong thing. In the headline there, we've already got it, right? We've got these children, they're 11-year-olds, by the way, which we'll get to. But these children are terrified that if they say something at 11, they will ruin their lives, their future. Pupils in the year 7 at Glenthorne High School in South London took part, separated into groups of white and non-white students for a new Channel 4 show. The 2 groups discussed race and ethnicity during timetabled sessions. White children were left in tears as they admitted they felt guilty about race. Right now, so these white people feel guilty about who they are. Yeah. I've said this before, and I've said it on a few times, that what's happening here is they don't care about you. They don't care about me. We're too long in the tooth, but they're going for our children. Yeah, because when they grow up in 20 years, they're going to be running the world. 20, 30 years. And they're going to have this massive complex. And do you think, like I said earlier, do you think the predator's going to look at them and go, hey, look, they look like they're sorry? Or is the predator going to go, hey, that's easy prey? Yeah. But anyway, we carry on. White children were left in tears and admitted they felt guilty and terrified of saying something racist that could follow them for life. These children realize the gravity, yeah, that if they say the wrong thing at the age of 11, that they could ruin their future prospects, their career. And we already saw that guy that did the banner. He lost his job, yeah. He lost his job just because he flew a banner, yeah. Pupils in the year 7 at Glenthorne High School in South London were separated into affinity groups. They've already said this, haven't they? I read it again. Affinity groups of white and non-white students discussed race and ethnicity during a 3-week experiment in Channel 4's new documentary. That school that tried to end racism, airing tomorrow, so they're just plugging the show. I've already said that crap. The segregated affinity groups, now they call them affinity groups, right? So they're saying, now, this is what I mean, the language they use. So the whites are one affinity, and everybody else is the other affinity. Everybody else. So they're telling us straight away, white versus everybody else. I mean, they're literally placing it in that. And then they accuse us of inciting racial hatred. They accuse us of causing this division. When they're making the divisions, they're doing it here right away. Yeah. The segregated affinity groups took place once a week, while 24 pupils aged 11 and 12 had further workshops and lessons together on white privilege and racial inequality. Well, we know how that goes because they say white privilege and racial inequality. It's only one way, right? It's a one-way street. Just like racial violence is a one-way street, just so you know. And I tell you what, anybody that disagrees with me, anybody in the chat here that thinks they know better, I tell you what, I'll do a promise to them. Every video that they show me of a bunch of white people beating up a black person, I'll show them 10 videos of the opposite. Yeah, I'll show them 10. So if they want to question that, I'll show them 10, and that's observed reality. Yeah, that's what we see with our eyes, not what some statistics tell us, not anything else. What we see. Anyway, let's get back to this, and I'm really sorry about these ads. They're freaking terrible. Experiments included showing pictures of black children to see how quickly students could associate negative words with them versus positive words with white children. Okay, so we've already set it up. Discussing what it means to be white and doing a privilege walk. What the? I'm looking. Like I say, I haven't fully read this article, so I'm not sure what a privilege walk is. Where they step forward or back in response to questions about their lives. Oh, so it's just to show that they're more privileged. So they're loaded questions, yeah. The program was devised by Mariama Richards, an American diversity inclusion. She's an inclusion practitioner, so as she includes people, she separates them up into groups and makes one group feel like shit and the other group feel good about themselves. Who introduced mandatory affinity programs in schools in New York and Washington, D.C. So, sorry, you Americans, your children are already being put through this. They're bringing it to the UK now. And in America, they're doing it on children as young as 8. When asked to discuss race, a student named Henry, by the way, is a little red-headed kid. And he suffers really hard from this. Henry broke down because he was terrified of saying something which could offend someone. Admitting, before I talk about race, I think about how it's going to affect me in the future if I say something bad. Early in life, it could come back in later life. This is what tipped me over the edge. Yeah, this is telling me that this child, and this is mental torture. Okay? This is mental torture. And let's just flip back on what it means when a child has no self-esteem. It leads to all sorts of problems in later life. It'll lead to drug abuse. It will lead to less value of their life. It'll lead to mental illness, right? It will lead to all these problems, and this is known and proven. Yeah. So they're setting up little Henry there to crack under the pressure of life. And there's a picture of little Henry next to his friend having a laugh. Well, behind that smile, though, of little Henry there is absolute terror that if he says something wrong to his back friend, he might suffer later in life. Yeah. So behind that's the smile there is not real. Right? That's not a real smile. He's terrified, he told us. He's terrified. He's laughing because he has to. And yes, Celtic God, there's no appeasement here, and this is what people need to understand. Those people that go, look, man, why can't we all just get along? It's too late. It's too late. They've pushed it, yeah, the media have pushed it. The media want this, 100% the media want this. The media, the power, the governments, they want this. But that doesn't, we've still got to face it, right? I wrote something a bit ago. What did I put? The darkness of our task, although forced upon us, is no excuse to fade before its power. The harsh realities of life's struggles are not spared on those who find them distasteful. With most of what we fight for already lost, we must remove the idea that this is a war of conservation. It is a war of creation. If we are to live, then we must live well. For what is the value of a struggle if in its final analysis it is reduced to a struggle for compromise? Anyway, let's carry on here a little bit. Getting a bit carried away there. But anyway, the scheme separated the children by race. I mean, Jesus Christ, who writes these articles where they repeat the same thing over and over again? Gee, I mean, it's just all padding. They should be marked down for this. Anyway, teachers are trained to run the affinity groups, with Dr. Nicola Rollock, an academic who works on race relations, and Professor Rhiannon Turner, joining the school throughout the experiment to observe how the children behaved. Dr. Nicola explained the approach to race in this country has been one of colour blindness. Here we go, right? Here we go, straight away. What we tried to do was say that there is no race and that everybody's the same. But that we pretend we don't see race. That approach isn't working. So anybody out there that thinks we can get through this by just ignoring it and pretending race doesn't exist. They're not going to allow you to do that. They're not going to allow you to do that. And that is this is what I'm trying to say here. They're not going to allow you. So if you think it, great, think it. But they're not going to allow you. Mariama Riches in America, I'm not going to read about that idiot. Bloody hell. And it's not, if you think, it's not buffering the thing, it's just, the ads are slowing the browser down to the point of, you could say, I'm not racist, but actually the actions might contradict what was coming out of our mouths. Headmaster Steve Hume said that if successful, the program would be built into the curriculum and explain why he felt it was vital to educate the children on the topic. He said, we're not just responsible for exam results. Yes, you are, actually. Yes, you are. But now he's going to tell us why they're actually responsible for social engineering. The first task was a game built by a group of professors at Harvard University, which is now widely accepted as a benchmark for measuring unconscious bias. We know who's given the unconscious bias here. It's the white kids. They're racists. During the test, students were shown pictures of blackface and whiteface with a list of positive and negative words. They were told to associate the negative words with black faces. What the hell? And positive words with white faces. So they were told to do that. And were timed to see how quickly they did it. So they were told to halfway through the test changed to match negative words with white face and positive words with black faces. After the test, Mr. Grant asked the children to tell him their thoughts. With one student called Henry explaining, personally, I don't think that there was too much of a problem. People overthink it. Now, poor Henry there, we've already heard that Henry's struggling with it, so he's actually lying there. Henry's pretending that there's not a problem when he admitted and burst out in tears at his fears that there is a problem. But it's not the problem they want Henry to see, and Henry knows that. He added, I don't think much about race except when I'm terrified about it. I added that bit for him. It's just not normally something I discuss because I'm terrified to discuss it, because if I do, it could haunt me for the rest of my life and I might never get employment. Meanwhile, Farah said, I think when it said make sure to put negative words with people who are white and positive words with people who are black, I found that a bit difficult. I don't know why. Professor Rhiannon explained, research shows for 11-year-olds making friends from different racial groups is easier. But as children get older, there is a process of self-segregation where children split off into different racial groups on the basis of their ethnicity. Intervening at this age is crucial if we are to target the change children's attitudes before they become crystallized with adulthood. We know what they want to do to the child's attitude, right? And I'm sorry, this is going on, but when I flicked through it, there were some good bits. Hopefully we get to them. After a break, the teacher explained that the results showed that there was an unconscious bias, with the majority of the class showing the bias towards white people in their own country by completing the task of associating positive words with them more quickly. So white people in their own country associate positive words with their own people. That's absolutely normal. 18 out of the 24, blah, blah, blah. Discussing the news with the group, Farah said, we usually think of a white person with better connotations. We don't usually think that black people have bad connotations. It's just that we find it easier to have good connotations with white people. I don't know if that makes sense. Not really. Mimirs Brunnr, who said he has encountered racism already as a young black man. So are black children now men? A young black man? This is 11-year-olds. Explained, I just try not to let it play on my mind too much. I'm sure you do, Mackay. For me, it's never going to go. There you go. Now we have it. This is an 11-year-old black child. He has been taught this. He has been taught that it will never go. So what's the point? What are we doing? Right? It's never going to go. It doesn't matter how much you bend over. It's never going to go, no matter how many times you take the knee. It's always going to be there, he says. People are always going to be treated differently because of their race. Mackay is a race realist, actually. But Dr. Rhiannon explained, we are exposed at an early age to white people in positions of power, white heroes and heroines. Well, of course you are, because you're living in a white country. All of these influences, just as if I was living in Nigeria, I'm pretty sure I'd be exposed to black people in power. All of these influences tell us that white people are better than black and ethnic minority people in society. They're not minorities. Speaking at the water fountain with his friend, Bright Henry admitted, I know they say not to feel bad about it, but you still feel bad about it because you know you've done something wrong. Again, this is where I get really angry. Poor Henry has done nothing wrong, except be white in a world that is telling him and teaching him that if he says anything bad, he could affect his future life. He's terrified. Henry knows he's done something wrong, and he hasn't. That is classic. That is mine. That angers me more than anything. More than they could beat the shit out of me, a bunch of people. It doesn't matter. That angers me because that's our future. That's what they're doing to us. Mariama joined the class, explained to the camera, I love affinity groups. I think we get more pushback when we start younger with students. I bet you love. Unfortunately, we just know that this is not the case. Yeah, whatever. She told the children, we're separating out for a little bit with the purpose of coming back together. You got me? Nah, we're not coming back together. You're separating us. Students, including girls, Beth and Miu, and boys, Bright and Henry, were asked to divide into white and non-white groups, bloody hell, with the idea that the children could discuss their experience of race without judgment. Farah admitted she was struggling to know where she belonged, saying, where do I go? I'm half white and half Asian, and I didn't know which room to go in. That's interesting there, right? The pupil who has a white English mother and a Sri Lankan father said her parents usually described her skin as olive colour. She explained, I don't really think about that, to be honest. Even though I look different to white people and black people, I don't think about it really. I don't want to be described by my race. I want to be described as my personality and who I am. Meanwhile, the other pupils in the non-white group told her, you stay here with us. In the white group, discussion was stilted and the pupils struggled to know what to say. As Mr. Grant asked them, have you ever thought what it means to be white? One of the girls admitted it doesn't really mean anything to be white. And that's what we heard in the clip. Meanwhile, in the non-white group, the children danced and laughed and sang as they discussed their respective ethnicities and heritage. So the white people, they don't know anything about their culture because all they know is that they should be guilty for something. Yet the oppressed people are dancing and laughing and singing when they discuss their heritage. Bright revealed, I love being described as black. He loves it. He loves being seen for his colour. Observing the difference between the two, Dr. Nicholas said the contrast, this is what we've seen in the clip, the contrast between the two rooms is phenomenal. But here's the extension to that quote. This room is like a carnival. This room is like a funeral. Yeah. One room, the oppressed, they're happy that they're minorities. They're happy with who they are. The other room, the whites, that the oppressors are terrified of who they are. They don't believe it means anything. They believe it comes attached with guilt. And yet the ones in the room like a funeral are the bad ones. I mean, this is sickness, what we've got here. And Yankees Ghost, I agree, this is twisted. This is madness. Henry told his group of white peers listening to their group, it sounds like they're enjoying it a lot, but I don't know if that's because we're not there. So now Henry even has a hang-up that when white people aren't around, black and minorities are happier. Meanwhile, Professor Rhiannon says Henry's experience as an outsider is a new experience. It's not a new experience for Henry. What this is, I don't know if... After the lesson was over, Mr. Grant explains that it isn't easy getting his white group to open up about race because they told you they're freaking terrified. He said it was hard work. You never really talk about what it means to be white with white people. Well, I do on this channel. And they're welcome to join anytime. They're welcome to talk about their race. They're welcome to play. We dance about it. I celebrate it. I celebrate what it means to be white. I celebrate what it means to be an Englishman. I celebrate what it means to be a European. I love who I am. I love my land and I love the people in it. My people. So if you're ever struggling, Mr. Grant, come join us. We'll talk about being white. In contrast, Mr. Odugem, welled up, as she recalled, discussing race for a non-white group, saying, I felt so privileged to be in a room with them discussing these things, of course, yeah. So the white teacher couldn't discuss whiteness with his, but the black teacher, they could talk about it easily. After being separated, they came back for feedback. Mackay said, I feel like it's a lot easier. I feel like it's good for us to talk about it and how we feel. So the so-called minority children came back positive. The white children came back terrified. Meanwhile, Lauren, who was part of the white group, explained, we want the non-white affinity group to know that we don't think any... Oh, so while they're being boosted up, they don't want to... They want to tell them, we don't think ourselves better than you because of how we look. Well, it's not just about how you look. It's not just about how you look. That's not what it is. They're obsessed with skin colour. They showed this with the... with Cheddar Man. Now, Cheddar Man's a pile of crap. I should do a video on it, but it's fake, yeah? But even if he was, right, he could be as black as the Ace of Spades. But he's my ancestor. A few miles down the road in the closest village to where his remains found, they tested one small school there and they found 4 descendants of his... would be descendants of one of his siblings. So it doesn't matter if he was black as the Ace of Spades, if he was red, blue, turquoise, green, or yellow, right? He's my ancestor. Yeah, they're obsessed with colour because they say that because he's black, then we should just flood our country with people that are not of here because, you know, well, he was black. Well, no, he's my ancestor. Doesn't matter what colour he is. Doesn't matter what shade of anything he is. He's mine. And he just proves that this land has been ours for a very, very long time. They found in the village next to him 4 descendants in one small school. And anyway, we'll carry on here. Meanwhile, Lauren is part of the white group. Oh, yeah, so she just apologises again for being white after they're celebrating being black. And Henry burst into tears and said he actually felt jealous of the other group. Henry's a smart lad. He knows the measure of the world and he is trying, like all children, to fit in. He's trying to fit into this world. But to fit in this world, he's going to have to go through some psychological, mind-bending trauma. Yeah. Later, speaking to his parents, Kevin and Sarah, he cried again, explaining what we were talking about is what it means to be white, and it felt really weird. It didn't feel comfortable. If I had the choice, I would be with my friends, not just by race, because that feels awful. And Farah also struggled to discuss the topics with her parents, saying, even though I am half white and half Sri Lankan, I can't feel comfortable in a room of white people because I know I'm different. Her parents say when she was little, she used to say she didn't want to be brown. Anyway, I can't... Does this keep going on? Yeah, I think I want to move on anyway. I'm just trying to scan it quickly to make sure there's not too much else. Oh, and then they got them to explain about racism. Marquet crying as he explained he was once asked to leave a shop after being accused of shoplifting. He doesn't tell if he did or not. In another experiment, the children tried the privilege walk. This is just... I mean, this is what set me off tonight, just reading parts of this. I didn't even read all of it. I mean, down here, one of the boys gasses not much about black history. They're in a Western country. I mean, this is insanity. This is just insanity. But I'm going to move away from that for a bit because honestly, it's winding me up. Reading it. And I'm going to have to tie this up, but I'm going to have to get another drink. I'll tell you what I'll try and do. Quickly set up a video for you. A shorter video, I promise. I promise it'll be a shorter video, but I'll quickly try and set up a video while I get another drink because I just didn't bring enough liquids here. And my mouth's going dry after trying to read that article there. So I'll just throw up... what should I throw up? Let's go with Heroic Myth. We'll go with that. Hold up. Sorry about this. I should have planned a little bit better. 1 second. I just really need a drink and I need to just rush to the bathroom quickly. Sorry. I wish I should edit this out later, but I won't. But yeah, we'll just quickly set this up and we'll be good. So, no.
In the north, our literature and ancient myth is abound with heroic figures. Sigurd's boldness, Starkarder's temperance, and Beowulf's loyalty, all imprint upon the mind an heroic ideal. An ideal that has shaped the northern man and instilled within him a purpose beyond himself. It is no wonder then that our history books are littered with such figures. The ancient north is the setting for 1,000 dramas of men, as one oppressor after another tried to quell his indomitable spirit. From Roman times we have the mighty Arminius, who after seeing his people's poor treatment, rose to bite the hand that had been forced upon him. Then there is the immortal beauty of Vercingetorix, whose love for his folk was so great, that after cruel defeat, on bended knee he offered himself to the mighty Caesar, in vain attempt to spare them from Rome's cruelty. The fight for freedom is an ongoing struggle that none have been spared. And at each calling, the spirit of the North has, even in defeat, shown its tenacious nature. The might of Rome had to fight tooth and nail for every inch of northern soil. Even when subdued, Gaulish and Germanic tribe alike, from Iceni to Batavi, smashed their bodies against the chains that bound them. Like a captive boar, they gnawed and chewed at their cage, till the gods and goddesses could no longer ignore them. Then Hunter became the hunted, and vengeance was granted to the just. This sentiment is mirrored through the ages. Many believe the Anglo-Saxons were defeated in 1066, but it took nearly 10 years for the Normans to fully overcome them. Outnumbered and with little hope, region after region and town after town rallied to resist, to refuse the rule of another by victory or death. With every leader that rose, and every people that refused servitude, reality and myth became entwined. A bridge developed between them, where mortals rose to godhood, and the gods themselves descended to the mortal realms to partake in the heroic drama of men. Mythology embodies the wisdom and aspirations of the collective folk soul. Within it we see the idea that gave birth to the man, how the gods and goddesses first dreamed us. This pure glimpse of ourselves bypasses all conditioning, all the drudgery of the daily grind, and begins to heal the man. Much like the ancient tribes of the north, who no matter how impossible their odds, could not accept their chains nor resist the temptation of freedom, we begin to see what we were intended to be. Through the observation of the heroic man, we start to understand why Freya, whose name is rooted in freedom and love, and who embodies all the pleasures of the free, was still celebrated long after the advent of Christianity. Why Woden, the breaker of chains and binder to the true self, still prowls the minds of men. You are not here to play a bit part in the dream of another. You are not here to stand at the back, hoping no one will see you, but rather to stand at the front as an example to others, to guide your own fate in accordance with the divine idea that bore you, to stare up at the heroic image, the heroic dream of yourself, and even if your arms are too short, to strive and reach upward.
Welcome back, folks. But yeah, so my beard's caught in my earphones as I run off there. But yeah, so I'm sorry about that. It was a bit of a long reading, a bit of a ramble. But the point I want to make is that disturbed me. And I've seen stories like that a lot. And it's not about... and what we can see there with young Henry, for instance. You wonder why there's white kids in Antifa joining these things? Because they're taught to freaking hate themselves. You wonder why... I'm not blaming, and I'm done blaming white people for anything anymore. When the Black Lives Matter protests were going on, they kept trying to blame Antifa. Now, I know that Antifa at its top is a Jewish-run organisation, pretty much. A lot of the people there, that is statistically accurate. Yet lots of young white kids get caught up in it because, like Henry, they get taught to feel shame about who they are. They get taught to feel that they have no heritage. They get taught to fear speaking, so they end up over compensating with that to fit into a profoundly sick society. And unless we, that's everybody here, start standing up to this, and I mean standing up to it, unless we start making our voices heard, it's going to continue. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse. How many little Henrys are out there? How many? 100,000? Few 100,000? Few million? I don't know. But everyone that's out there, that's a nail in the coffin. Remember they said it was like a funeral in the White Room? Where the other one was like a carnival? Sound like dancing on someone's grave? I've had enough. I did a little article recently, and I don't know what I've done with it now. I had it in my hand a minute ago, but I seem to have misplaced it. Oh, here it is. I found a small piece of flint, and I did a little article on it. There's some pictures elsewhere, but I can't really properly show it you here. It's not really getting the... but it's a beautiful piece of work flint. It dropped from someone's hands, probably the Mesolithic, maybe the Neolithic. And as I've said, there has been migrations, of course, but Cheddar Man had direct descendants of his siblings living just a few miles from where his body was found, 9,000 years later. Yeah, so this fell out of somebody's hand, maybe 9,000, maybe 7,000, maybe 5,000 years ago. And it fell into mine through time. crossed the spans of time and came to my hand. Now it could be one of my ancestors, or it might be one of yours watching if you're from these isles. But this is what it means, and this is a reminder that this is ours. Not because we were born lucky. I'd hate that phrase, that we won the lottery. No, we didn't. I could not be born to anybody else other than my parents, and them to theirs. There is nowhere else I could have been born. This was not luck that I'm here. It wasn't random. I'm here because of my ancestors, because of who they were, the struggles that they endured, and what they carved out for me. They carved this piece of the world out for me through their blood and toils. Yeah? Every part of this nation, is touched by man, by my ancestors. Every part of it, every trackway, every hedge, every field, every building, everything. It's mine. And the same for yours. Yeah, I am literally the culmination. My personality, my physical form is not just because of some random chance. It was because of what they endured and what they did. Yeah. This is... to think any other way is madness. And to give this up, to allow our children to be psychologically tortured, to feel bad about who they are on our lands, these sacred lands, like I say, this came out of the ground on a little bank, a small incline in the woods that I visit often. But that very soil, the very soil beneath my feet, is made up of the blood and bones of my ancestors. And that soil nourished me through the crops that are grown on it. And one day I'll return to that soil. I'll join them in this soil, my soil. Huh? And they want me to give this up. No. They want my children to grow up in a world that hates them, that they feel bad for it. No. This is mine and it's mine alone. Well, mine and my people, my folks. Yeah? And I'm not giving it up for no one. I'm not getting on no knees. I'm not buying any of their rules. I'm not getting no apps. I'm not doing nothing that infringes upon my freedoms that my ancestors fought for and died for. I don't know about Mrs. Gopal's ancestry, what they fought and died for over in India. Maybe she should go over there and fight for them. How many Indians live in poverty? Does she care for them? No, she cares about educating me on why my ancestors, through their successes, are evil. And her ancestors are nothing but victims, even though, like I say, she was a privileged Indian from a very wealthy class. And they still have the caste system over there, but she doesn't want to address that. She doesn't want to address that because there's no money in it over there in India. No one gives a shit. Just like when they come here and start doing lectures on female genital mutilation, which is just female circumcision. They do. At least they're consistent over there in the Arab world, I suppose. They chop up everybody's private parts when they're babies. And like I say, I've seen some comments here and there, and I've seen people comment everywhere else that, don't buy into the media. Well, it doesn't matter if you don't. Most people are. Yeah? So when they come knocking at your door, or when you get caught out on the street, you go, oh, look, I don't buy into this race. Well, they don't give a shit. They won't care about you. They won't care if you marched with them last week. Like I say, it's not about what you think. It's about where the world's heading. And you've got to be prepared for that. You've got to see what's going on and you've got to call. You've got to pick a side because you're either all the way that way or you're all the way this way. The worst place to be is in no man's land. It's the worst place. So it's time we picked a side. And it's time we fought for our side. Because otherwise you're just going to get trapped in no man's land. No one's going to accept you. No one's going to want you. And you're going to take flack from both sides. And that's the truth. That's a reality. It isn't, like I say, do I know that they want my anger? I know they want my anger. But what am I supposed to do? Someone slaps me in the face, am I supposed to go, well, and somebody says, don't react to him because he just wants you to slap him back. What the fuck? It doesn't matter, does it? He's slapping me in the freaking face. He's going to get that reaction. Because if he doesn't get that reaction, what am I? And when people are abusing our children, that is child abuse, what I read there. That is child abuse. And it's child abuse, racially targeted child abuse, ethnically targeted child abuse. This is genocide. People go, oh no, it's not genocide, not replacement, why can we all get along? Bullshit, it doesn't matter, it's happening. Everything I've been warned about for over 15 years, everything I've looked at is coming to a head. And like I say, you're either all the way that way or you're all the way this way. And no one wants to get trapped in no man's land. Because there's no salvation out there. You're going to get a hit in the crossfire. But like I say, this land's mine. When I go out there, I treat it with the respect it deserves. That soil, like I say, is mine. It's built of my ancestors. And I'm going to allow people to come here and just take it. Not only take it, we're going to allow people in and let them tell us that we've got to change. We know that wouldn't wash anywhere else. But anyway, I'm ranting. But yeah, there was a couple of points I think I wanted to finish on. In the consequence of cowardice, we have the story of the Kimberley. And we know what they did when they were given the option of slavery or death. Our ancestors honoured sacrifice just as much as they honoured glory. We also remember the story of Verdun, the Saxons, celebrating probably a mother goddess, considering they didn't have any weapons with them, because it would be unholy to carry them. Like when we get the caravan, the carts of both Frey and Nerfus are both explained in the same way. We even have archaeological evidence dating back that there were certain areas where they found no tools, yet there was lots of people there, no weapons. It seemed to be a place of religious celebration. It seems to be what's happening at Verdun. The Saxons, celebrating their mother goddess, were set about by Christians. Unable to defend themselves, they were easily overwhelmed. And then they were given an option: convert or die. They had no hesitation. They were not bowing and they were not submitting, no matter what the cost. And I think we've reached a point where we can't bow. We've got to stand firm at our ground. We've got to pick our lines in the sand, draw them and stick to them, come what may. Because I say, it doesn't get better if you compromise. There's no compromise you can make. You heard it in that article. You heard it on the Twitter feed. Even though they're trying to make themselves out to be the better ones, they're telling you, you don't see race, you're the problem. You're the problem. You're more racist than the right-winger. And yes, Rainey, they've been doing it for years. It's just coming to fever pitch now. They're pushing it and they're pushing us. And they want our reaction. Like I said, they want it. But we've got to give it to them then, haven't we? And like I say, I've said this before. Bravery right now. You want to be brave right now? Speak up openly. That's what we do right now. Because we don't have to resort to violence. We don't. Not yet. We're not a minority. If we speak in unison, they stop. But while we go along to get along, Why we keep just accepting it and keep just going, well, you know, I'll just keep my head down. We are then the coward. Yes, we become the coward. Because we are picking our own little betterment over our future. If you've got children like I have, I don't want a world where they feel ashamed of who they are, where they have to feel bad that if they say the wrong thing at such a young age that they are going to have their rest of their lives ruined and dismantled. What happens when we become a minority? Well, South Africa is a good example. They have positive discrimination in South Africa, or affirmative action in South Africa. Not for the minority whites, like we do in the Western countries for the minorities, but for the blacks. There'll be no rock to crawl on. No one's going to care what you think and your liberal ideas. No one's going to care about them. No one's going to care that you're a libertarian and think everybody's just equal. No one's going to care. That's the truth. Right? There was a woman in a wheelchair in the protest, and what she tried to do, she confused the riots with a protest. And when some people started rioting, she went over to them and said, let's not riot. It's going to be bad. They hit her. One even went into her purse and rifled for her drugs. And they beat her and sprayed her in the face with a fire extinguisher. Because she mistakenly thought that this was about some kind of righteous cause. It's not. It's about her demise. And we've got to stop celebrating our own demise, and we've got to stand up. We've got to. And I mean this. We've got to start speaking up. Because at the moment, people talk about, we're going to, all violence and all this stuff. We're too scared to speak at the moment. We're too scared. We're too scared to say to people we know what we believe. And that was one of the reasons that I did this on Mimirs Brunnr. Because Mimirs Council, I don't hide it. But I think this message needs to reach everybody. Even people that don't want to deal with politics. Politics is coming for you. The world's coming for you. It doesn't matter what you believe. And this is the point I want to make. It's coming whether you acknowledge it or not. It doesn't give a shit what you think. Unless we defend ourselves, unless we stand our ground, we become prey. And predator will chase. Make no mistake. We owe it to our posterity to defend this ground. Come up, may. Now, I'm going to get off now because it's been late and I've been rambling for a little bit. Like I say, I do apologise that it wasn't more structured, but I wanted to get it off my chest. And thanks for joining me, guys and ladies and lads out there. It's been great talking to you. I'll leave the what I'll do as well is I'll leave the outro screen up and we can have a little chat and I'll hang around in the chat for a little bit. Somebody's asking where it will be archived. I'm going to leave it up on YouTube for probably a day and then I'll have to put it over at LBRY because leaving it up here too long with what I've said tonight will probably end up getting our channel taken away from us, which is something we do try not to get because it just allows us to reach more people. But our LBRY channel is actually fast becoming our main channel. It's over 7,000 subscribers at the moment. This is only just over 8, so it's catching it up fast. All right, guys, I'm going to hit the outro screen now. I'm going to grab a drink and then I'll leave it up for a bit and we can have a chat in the the little chat box. All right, well, thanks for listening and be well and be true to yourself. Night for now.